Welcome everyone. My name is Divya Pawar and I'm a training coordinator at the Small Business Development Center. We help small businesses start and grow, and we're doing this through consulting over the phone or through Zoom and with a robust calendar of training events. You are here for the food business series, how to sell your product, solving problems for the customer. And this session will cover options for selling your product and how to market yourself in a way that solves problem and responds to a customer's need in the market. This webinar is the third in the 9-part series, and we will also have office hours the next day of the webinar from 6:30 to 8:30, and I will post a link in the chat. For the webinar, we have all the attendees muted, and we encourage you to put your questions in the chat or Q&A. All attendees will receive the presentation and recording after the webinar. This webinar is presented by Tandem Associates, and with that, I will turn the floor to George.
Thank you, Divya. Welcome, everybody. If you could, for those of you that have access to your chat, just go in the chat. Let me know if this is the first session or if you've been to multiple sessions since we've done this. Just curious to see. I did see some familiar names in the panelists. Great, Shannon, Stacy, thank you. Welcome back. Glad to have you all back. Adam, welcome. Stephanie, welcome to your first session here. Great. So as Divya said, my name's George Latella. I'm going to run you through the session tonight. And as Divya said, there's two ways we can communicate tonight. One is through the chat. So if you have a specific question, if you need some clarification on some of the slides I'm talking about, if you want me to have a little further discussion, happy to do that tonight. I have a lot of slides to get through. I'm not sure if I'll get through to all slides or not, but the good news is tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8:30, as Divya said, we do have office hours, and I will be available for those 2 hours. So if you have very specific questions, maybe to something you're thinking about doing, maybe you have a meeting set up already, or you want to talk a little more detail about something specific, I'm happy to do that tomorrow night. So this is the schedule for those of you that have been in multiple sessions. Hopefully you've been to the first couple of sessions. We do have a couple of folks that were kind of from the second series and first series. So this is the third time we're doing this. And as you can see tonight, we're on July 21st, but we do have next week sales forecasting, market sizing, and gap analysis. I will be doing that. The week after that, cost of goods, pricing, and profit margin expectations. I'll be doing that webinar as well. And then my partner, Mark Flamanda, will be back on August 11th and August 18th. Really around the marketing, communications, and digital and social media. Both of us, Mark and myself, will be back on the 25th talking about consumer trade promotion, and Mark and I will be back together to do new product development. And we don't have the date on here, but on Saturday, September 11th, we're actually doing our third boot camp. So we'll talk about that a little more, but the first two boot camps have worked out really well. It's an opportunity for you to have access to us. We bring some of our colleagues in the morning for kind of like business consulting, and then you actually develop and present either a full PowerPoint or a couple of PowerPoint slides or a business concept or whatever, and then we give you feedback. And the cool part the first two times we've done this is you get to hear other people's ideas and feedback and questions that we ask other folks too. So that's on Saturday, September 11th. So we have a couple of almost a couple months till we get to that. So I did want to talk a little bit about Temple Small Business Development Center. They are bringing this webinar to you all. We got money from the CARES Act, from the COVID funding, and we're able to offer this to you for free. So you'll hear me say multiple times tonight and tomorrow night if we talk, please make sure you use the free resources at Temple Small Business Development Center. Obviously, if you need paid resources, that's out there as well. But many of the folks that we've had help us with these webinars, we're here to help you for free. And if you need help be outside, again, we would encourage you all to go to Small Business Development, where they do have advisors available as well. So a little bit about myself. I've been teaching food marketing at St. Joe's University for 29 years. I have 35 years sales and marketing experience working for a company called Tasty Cakes. I think most of you all are probably either East Coast or Philadelphia. You should be familiar with the Taste Cake brand. And concurrently with working at Tasty Cake, I have spent the last 29 years, as I said, teaching food marketing at St. Joseph's University. It's one of the largest majors on campus. During my time at Tasty Cake, I developed people, processes, programs. I was responsible for the national sales effort. So I think pretty well qualified to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. And I do have some examples from some of my friends in food as well of how they think about selling products. Outside of St. Joe's and outside of Latella and Associate, I consult for a couple different companies, Tandem Associates being one of them. And again, we primarily are focused on food and beverage marketing companies. My partner, Mark, will be here in a couple of weeks. He runs Tandem, and he's been doing that for 26 years. So you'll see some of the brands that Mark works with below, a lot of food brands. Mark and I have known each other for 35 years as well. Mark worked for the advertising agency that handled all of our commercials and marketing communications at Tasty Cake. And for those of you old enough to remember, nobody bakes a cake as tasty as Tasty Cake. Mark's agency was responsible for that. So he's been around a long time and worked on a lot of great food brands. So what I thought I would do first is one of my colleagues, Ron Tanner, just retired from a place called the NASFT, National Association of Specialty Food Trades. You may be familiar with them, or Specialty Food Association if you've been to their website. They run a great trade show called the Fancy Food Show up in New York City and also on the West Coast. So Ron spent, I believe, 30 to 35 years at Specialty Food, and he kind of attacks it from that side. So what I thought I would do is just share a couple of Ron's slides initially with you, and then we'll jump into my piece. So when we think about what's a specialty food, and again, I'm making an assumption here that many of the products you all are thinking about would be considered specialty food. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about selling from Ron's perspective. We'll talk about selling to retail and selling to food service. So there's kind of two different thought processes to go through with that. We'll talk a little bit about promotion, and then we'll handle some Q&A again as we go through. So if you have any questions at all, please either jump on the Q&A or the chat. So I'll let you read this. It's easier for you to read this for me to read it out loud of what specialty food is. So a couple of things, and I did highlight what I think are important, bold. What most of you have, without me knowing anything about what you're doing, what most of you have is you're unique, and because you're unique, your product's unique. So even if you're making a hot sauce or a simmer sauce or a barbecue sauce or pickles or some baked goods or whatever it is you're making, it's you. That's what sets it apart. It's original, it's authentic. Maybe there's some cultural significance to it. Maybe it's specific ingredients you're using. There's a whole bunch of different things that make it special. And because it's special, that's where the perceived value comes in. You'll hear me talk a lot about, how do we create value for the customer? Because if we are able to create value, we're able to capture a premium price. So again, a couple things that set specialty foods apart: taste for sure, maybe ingredients, maybe small process, and again, primarily, I think the person behind the product. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data. And one of the things I will tell you, if you're not familiar with using data to present and data to sell, is if and when you sell to a food retailer, you have to show data. You have to have data. Now, you can get data in a couple different ways. You can buy the data or you can find the data. So most of what I'm going to share with you would be things you could get for free with a little bit of sweat equity. So here's an example. This is from the Specialty Food Association State of the Industry Report, which you can see down the bottom here. So anytime we show data, it's always good to tell people where you got the data from. So again, this just kind of does a setup of what we're looking at. So some top line. Sales topped 158 billion of what we consider specialty food. So pretty big category. 3/4 of that comes from retail, from food retail, and about 25% from food service, only 3% online. And then of all the food sold at retail, it represents 20% of all food sales. So again, if you think about, regardless of whether you're going to a grocery store or a club store or a convenience store or a super center like Walmart or Target, specialty food represents 20% of all those sales. And again, probably a real important thing here, specialty food sales jumped almost 9%, while the rest of the food categories grew 3%. So this would be a great example of an insight or a data point that would get the retailer's attention. So with this point right here, basically says specialty food is growing at 3 times the rate of all other foods. So that would get my attention. Now, again, that would be something interesting for you to present. Cheese and plant-based cheese, biggest category. No surprise there. For those of you that have been doing any kind of reading on the food industry, plant-based is really hot and has been hot for about 5 years. And then if we look here from a category standpoint, it gets a little more specific. So on one hand, we look at the overall cheese and plant-based category, and then we can see within that, what are the subcategories? And then within those categories, the even smaller, okay? Again, down the bottom, 6 of the top 10 categories are refrigerated or frozen. So that would be significant if you're selling a perishable product. So here's pictorially showing what we had in that other insight, right? We're growing at almost 3 times the rate. And again, from a selling standpoint, just look at this visual, pretty significant visual, right? You can look at this, it's pretty dynamic, the change between the two. And again, a lot of times we want to kind of drive, show a pretty picture and talk about the insight over here. So many of the people that you're going to present to are going to take your presentation. And yes, we still actually do hard copy presentations a lot of the time. And even if you present off of an iPad or a tablet or something like that, you should always have a hard copy leave behind. Because a lot of times what will happen is the buyer or the retail customer will take different slides out of your presentation. So maybe they tear this page out and go show their boss, hey, we got to have this product in here. It's growing 3 times as fast as the category. Here's an example again of compounded annual growth. So this CAGR is compounded annual growth rate. And this just shows it trended over time. So this is where we're kind of here. So 2020 is the last actual year. And this is where we're forecasting. Okay, so you can see that this green bar here is growing. That's the actual raw dollars. And the blue line is the actual percentage growth. So the line is getting up. The key point here is the trend line is going up. Okay, visually, that's what we want to kind of highlight. Now, pre-COVID, e-commerce was growing, but since we've been involved in COVID, e-commerce has just taken off. And a lot of the studies that we're seeing are at the end of 2020, where we kind of ended 2020 is where we thought we would be 2025. So we're kind of like 5 years ahead of where we thought we would be with regard to online sales. So the question that we're all trying to study now and understand is it going to continue to grow, or are we just going to hold this rate? And that obviously nobody has the answer to that. So here's an example of 3 different ways to look at it from a brick and mortar retailer. So these are actual physical retail locations. The green bar would be mainstream stores, okay? The light green bar would be specialty food stores. And then the blue bar would be natural food stores. So you can think of places like Sprouts, maybe Whole Foods, those kinds of places here. Specialty stores are typically not large chains. And then these chains here would be things like Walmart, Target, Kroger, Acme, Aldi, Save-A-Lot, Costco, those kinds of places. So you can see the bulk of the food will be in what we consider mainstream stores. And again, if we look at the growth, look at the growth rate, and this is comparing 2018, 2017, 2019. So obviously things were down a little bit here because it was bricks and mortar and because of COVID. So if we added something in here for e-commerce, e-commerce will be exploding. So again, here's an example of the categories that are growing. So let's just look at a couple of these: cheese, poultry, chips, pretzel, snacks, coffee, hot cocoa, bread and baked goods, chocolate, refrigerated, frozen, bottled water, frozen entrees. So this shows the top 10 categories with total retail sales. This is raw dollars. And this shows the top 10 categories with the highest percentage growth. So I mentioned plant-based before. You can see here, plant-based meat alternatives have the highest percentage growth. If we look over here, they're not even close to being in the top 10 categories, but they're growing the fastest. So depending on what you have, if you're on both lists, that's a good thing, right? So I'm looking down here, it looks like water is on both lists, and that may be the only thing that's on both lists. So let's take a look at what's happened with COVID. And again, I talked about online growing. Pre-COVID, the online channel grew 133%, okay? COVID-driven spike had many people for the first time order online because we had to. So the question again for us to figure out over the next 6 months or the next couple of years is, are people that ordered online because they had to going to go back to grocery stores, or are they going to stay ordering online? That's the $1 million question. Okay, so let's talk about how do you sell to retail. And again, remember the way we define retail would be things like Walmart, Wegmans, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Acme, Kroger, Costco, those kinds of places, okay? And we have them listed down here. We call them mass merchants, chain supermarkets, or specialty supermarkets. And then we also have natural food stores. You're all familiar with Whole Foods. Sprouts is actually expanding on the East Coast. Fresh Thyme is not here yet, but they're growing as well. And then if you're from the Philadelphia area, you probably have heard of the Bruno Brothers. That's probably the biggest name on here from a specialty food standpoint. But regardless of where you're from, I guarantee the city that you're in has stores that would be considered specialty food stores. And then we also have other non-traditional outlets, like some of the chains like Bed Bath & Beyond, Lowe's, TJ Maxx, etc. So some things to think about when you're picking a retail is, what's the sales volume potential? And we'll talk about sales forecasting next week. Do you think this is a national opportunity, a regional opportunity, or a local opportunity? How are you going to get the product to market? And then hopefully, again, you have a plan. So one of the things we talked about a couple weeks ago in food marketing strategy is the importance of having a plan. So hopefully you have a plan, okay? And for example, maybe year 1 goal is I want to get into 10 stores. Year 3 goal, I want to get into 25 stores. And year 5 goal, you want to get into chains, like regional supermarket chains. So again, these are some of examples of specialty retailers. The closest thing we have to us here in Philadelphia would be the Bruno Brothers. So specialty food, these are some characteristics of specialty food retailers. Typically owned by an entrepreneur, very hands-on, usually micromanaged, so you have to convince them why they need your products. The reason why they consider themselves specialty food retailers is they like to sell things that nobody else has, or that very few people have. And all of them like to be first to market with a new product. So that's usually the place we tell people to start, is start in a small, either independent specialty store or independent grocery store, because typically the staff's more knowledgeable. They work there because they believe in the product as well. So these are some characteristics. They're smaller stores. They typically focus on one category or a couple categories. They typically buy direct from the manufacturer. They have to work on higher margin because they charge higher prices. They have lower turnover. And they know they're going to have higher prices than supermarkets and places like Walmart and Target. But since you can only get their products here, they think it's worth the extra money. And this is an example of some retailers. Again, the closest thing we have here for us in the Northeast is Wegmans. All 6 of these are great retailers. We do actually have a couple of fresh markets here in the Northeast as well. So these are some characteristics of regional supermarkets. Typically bigger, they buy through distributors. So again, when we get to the chapter on, or we get to the webinar on how you're going to get your product to market, really important. We talk about that in new product development. Obviously, you could make and sell your product, but if you're trying to get to 150 stores, you're not going to physically be able to drive your product to 150 stores. So that's typically where distributors come in, or wholesalers or things like that. We'll talk about that in another webinar. And these are some examples of the national chains. So again, the chain stores typically sell mass market products, but they are looking to bring specialty items in because they're trying to differentiate themselves as well. All of them are really pushing regional and local and fresh and authentic and artisanal. So they're really interested in that. So again, if you have a unique product and a unique story, generally they'll listen to you. I'm not going to guarantee they're going to buy your product, but generally they'll listen to what you have to say. And again, typically bigger stores. The way that the grocery stores work is they typically have buying windows. So you have to understand the customer. We talked about the customer and the consumer. The customer would be the retailer. So many retailers make decisions, a couple times a year. You have to know when they're making the decision, because if they make their decision in October and you're presenting to them in November, they've already decided what's going to go on the shelf in December or January, as an example. Online is a whole different animal. Obviously, we have Amazon at the top of the list. Target's here, Instacart's here, Walmart. There's a million online sites you can go to potentially sell. So again, we think about online. In 2019, before COVID, it represented just 2% of food sales, and it represented 3% of specialty food sales, but it grew at a rate of 133%. So again, this 3% is now 6%, if you think of it that way, or 7%, something like that. So still low relative to other numbers, but the growth has been really dramatic. So let's talk about, okay, how do you prepare for a buyer meeting? And I have a couple of different viewpoints on this topic. So this is from Ron Tanner's perspective, Specialty Food Association. Preparation is always important. You're going to see preparation on everybody's list to think about. So what you need to understand is how much time you have for the meeting. Assume if you have a half an hour meeting, you're not going to have 30 minutes of time. So always make sure you have your presentation ready to go. And if you need to shorten your presentation, you can shorten it. You know where you're going to cut. Okay. You definitely want to bring samples. So even if the buyer does not like to eat that product necessarily, you want to show them the package. You want to show them the product. You want to let them touch it, feel it, taste it, smell it, all that great stuff. Okay. And you should basically have a recommendation of where you think that product fits in the grocery store shelves. And you should also know what the store carries in the category. So before you go see a retailer, go to their stores, find out who your competition is, and make sure you're able to answer questions or ready to answer questions if need be. Know how the buyer brings product in. So maybe it's direct. Maybe they're going to want you to deliver it direct. Probably not. Maybe it's through a distributor. Maybe they want you to use a broker. Know how the retailer prices the product. So again, we'll talk about this in a couple weeks, but understand what their margin expectations are. You need to know what your margin expectations are. And again, if 3 or 4 people have to touch the product, it's going to cost money throughout the whole distribution channel to get the product to market. And then really important, why does your product sell to the customers? What problem do you solve for that customer? So I like to think all the time, what problems do you solve for the customer's customer? If you think of it in terms of you're going to go present to Acme, you need to understand who Acme's customer is, and then go to Acme and say, here's who your customer is, and here's the problem that my product solves for that customer. Okay, that's how you want to think about this. And that's how you communicate the value proposition. That's how you create what your product is worth. Okay, always arrive early. So I drove today. I went to see a couple of friends for lunch. Didn't think there'd be any traffic. There was traffic. So I allowed myself extra time. I certainly got there before everybody else. It's always good to get to the meeting early. Obviously, you have to be passionate about what you're selling. If you're presenting to somebody and you have no passion, why should they care about your product, right? So make sure you have passion. Bring numbers. Okay, if you have data, you're certainly going to have pricing data, but you're going to have to understand their margin expectations. Definitely bring product. As I said, you want to leave the product, and maybe sometimes they'll taste the product, or maybe they have buying groups to taste the product. And then I always bring some printed material to leave behind. So again, it's okay to present off of a laptop or a tablet, but you definitely want to leave hard copy stuff so that they can go to a meeting and they can pass that around to other people. Again, some presentation tips. Bring your story, show them your staff, maybe the people, where you're making it. What are the attributes? So again, think about where we are today in 2021. If you have things that are important to retailers, like diversity, like female owned, like minority owned, natural, organic, vegan, gluten-free, no high fructose corn syrup, no trans fats, whatever it is, plant-based protein. Think about the things that are hot and think about the things that are trending, and you should have that included in your presentation. And then always, 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 if you're able to get somebody to say yes, stop talking. Probably the most important part of sales. Okay, let's talk about selling to food service. So food service is any business that sells food that's eaten outside of the home. So that could be McDonald's, that could be Wawa, that could be Burger King, that could be Panera. That could actually be within a grocery store if you go to the food court or the prepared foods area. So before COVID, food away from home or food service represented about half of all food sales. And if we looked at a trend line, it was growing. So pre-COVID, we would have expected food away from home to pass food at home in 2020, which it obviously didn't because we were forced to go back to grocery stores and buy food and have the food come to us. But that trend has been going on for quite some time. So if we think of food service, especially in natural foods, 22% of sales come from food service, which again, remember what I said, 22 come from food service, which means 78 doesn't come from food service, okay? So sometimes companies just focus on retail or just focus on food service. And again, here's some examples of big chains that do food service. And food service is broken down to a couple of different ways. So we have fine dining, we have chain restaurants, we have fast casual. My guess is most of you that are small entrepreneurs are not going to penetrate this part of the market. So I would focus on that retail piece that I talked about. But if you're able to get maybe to a local restaurant or independent restaurant, these would be things of ways you create value for the restaurant. Can you save them time? Can you save them labor? Is your product easy to use? Is it consistent? Does it eliminate waste? So for those of you that ever worked in a restaurant, these are all key things. I mean, these are key things for everybody. But think about if you've worked in a restaurant, right? Can I save time? Because if I save time, I save labor. If I save time and I save labor because the product's easy to use or it's pre-cooked or pre-cut, I save money. If I'm able to get consistency, then I deliver the same experience to consumers and I reduce my waste. So that's how you might create value for food service. Where are you going to sell your product? And this goes for retail too, right? Identify your target market. You're going to hear me talk about target market in a little bit. Who's the potential buyer? And most importantly is who's the decision maker. So you may go talk to the owner of a restaurant, but the owner may not be the decision maker. The chef may be the decision maker, or maybe the food and beverage manager is the decision maker because they're the ones that have the number. So you really need to understand in each situation who the decision maker is. So again, some differences: packaging for sure, portion control. Food service, there's really no label, so there's really no reason to sell branding in food service. It's really hard to sell the brand in food service. Has a totally different distribution system, and again, really no brand recognition. Let's talk a little bit about promotion. So again, we have a whole session on this talking about marketing communication, but these are just some ways that you can promote. What I thought I would do here is just talk about trade shows, because that would be really important for you guys if you're thinking about getting into a specialty food store or if you're thinking about getting into a specific retail store. So when we think about trade show planning, and this is actually a picture of this specialty food show, the fancy food show. This happens to be at the Javits Center in New York City. I would tell you, before you spend money to exhibit at a trade show, I would go walk the trade show floor. So the specialty food show, as I said, the fancy food show happens a couple times a year. I'm pretty sure it's happening in September. I'll double check that, but that would be an example. If you're close to New York City, take a train, take a bus, whatever, get up there and just $50 to get into the show. Just go walk around and see what it is before you spend a lot of money. See the kind of people that are walking around. Maybe on a slow day, talk to some of the people that are exhibiting, okay? So that one of the key things is when you're walking up and down the aisles, take note at the booths that are interesting to you, that you might want to go look in. And that's how you want to think about that. And again, once you get a booth, make sure you train your staff to make sure that you are making the most of their time in the booth. You got to present yourself really well. You have to understand what your competitive advantage is to other people. So you're actually going to be selling on your feet. You know, it's almost like the elevator pitch. As I said, I would go and look at other booths and try to kind of network with those people. And think about both make sure you're on your A game when the trade show floor opens and also when the trade show floor closes. Sorry about that. So I can't tell you how many times I've been to a trade show at the end of the day and people are sitting down, people aren't facing the customers, people are on their phone, people are having a conversation. Maybe there's no time, there's sometimes nobody in the booth. That's not a good experience. Once you have the show, make sure that you have some way to collect your lead information. In other words, when you have a conversation, people, maybe it's business cards. I used to do both business cards and I had a clipboard and I would actually write notes. Now, a lot of the trade shows are using electronic contact collection, so you can actually use a scanner to collect their information. But make sure you follow up quickly and send samples. And again, figure out what went well and what you can do better, okay? When you think about that, obviously you should be giving your product away. Let people sample the product, show people what the product looks like, maybe have trade show specific pricing. If they give you the order now, you give them a special deal, or maybe you have some different things going on to help create that, okay? All right, and I forgot to mention, we are going to share this PowerPoint. So Ron was unable to join us tonight, but if you have specific questions about specialty food, I did include Ron's info there. So let me stop the share for a minute. Does anybody have any specific questions for that first session? Just type them in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions, so I'm going to keep going here. Okay, so again, for those of you that saw the first session on food marketing strategy, you're going to see some similar slides. So there are slides I include in every presentation I do. For Temple, every presentation I do. For St. Joe's, every presentation I do all over the place. This is one of them. My mission is to help you solve the problems of your customers. So my goal tonight is obviously give you enough information to think about how you might develop a selling presentation. And again, if we have a chance to talk in the office hours tomorrow night, or I need the upcoming weeks, I'm happy to give you guys as much guidance as I can in the amount of time that we have. So one of the things I like to talk about when we talk about value is this thing called perceptions reality. And I'll just show you that picture. So again, if I leave the picture up there, you'll see it's a mom holding her cub. But if I went through that pretty quick, you might think that's a bad situation, not a good situation. So perceptions reality for me basically means that whatever the customer sees, the customer sees. They perceive what they want to perceive. And again, remember, most of you are going to create a brand and create a company. You're not going to have as much marketing money in your budget as other big companies. So you have to be smarter with how you spend your money and how you position yourself and how you present yourself. And you want to make sure that you present yourself like a legitimate big company, because people are going to make an impression on you as soon as they see it. So again, I like to say, for me, I've been doing this a long time, and the way I define, old wise guy is age plus mistakes. I have made a lot of mistakes in my career. I've had a lot of successes as well. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Make sure you make them quick, and make sure you learn from your mistakes and don't repeat the mistakes. That's the key. All right. So I talked about this a lot in the first session, life lessons learned. And I will tell you, this is a really, really, really important one. The first session, we talked about food marketing strategy and really sales and marketing planning. Mark was on last week talking about brand planning. And if you think about this tonight, we're talking about sales planning or sales presentation planning. So typically what happens is we have an overall corporate strategy, We have a sales and marketing strategy. And then each thing underneath that, we want to have a plan. We want to have a roadmap of what we want to do. Okay. And when I talk about this all the time, I say life is a series of choices, decisions, and consequences. Okay. You have the opportunity now. You have lots of choices. Maybe you have a product. Maybe you don't have a product. Maybe you're going to sell to a different retail channel, specific market, whatever. You have lots of choices. You're going to make a decision, and hopefully make the right decision, which is more positive consequences than negative consequences. So I always like to say, when you're thinking about selling, think about these three questions: so what, why, and how. When you present data, when you present information on your company, ask yourself, so what? Does the buyer care about me? Does the buyer care about my family, my history, where the product's from? Maybe yes. If you present data, so I showed you some slides from the Specialty Food Association. Okay, what does this mean? That's the so what. And then the why you feel that way is your opinion or your analysis or interpretation or insight into what you're presenting. And then most importantly for the retailer is how. How are you going to take this information and how are we going to implement this in my store? So you want me to take this new product, you want me to put it here in the store, you want me to price it here, and you want me to promote it this way. That would be an example. That's the how. Okay, that's the how. A little easier way to understand that would be, this is basically everything we talk about in the marketing process. So again, we talk about the stuff up front, the external stuff: customers, company, competition, collaborators, context. We'll talk a little bit about segmentation, market, target market selection, and positioning. You really need to understand this to sell. And then the how, this is where the how comes in: product, place, promotion, and price. Ultimately, everything you're doing, the retailer cares about this. They want to get customers, that's called customer acquisition. They want to keep customers, that's called customer retention. And there should be another box over here called customer development. Acquire, retain, develop. Acquire, retain, develop. I'll say that a million times. If you're able to tell retailers that you're going to bring new people in the store, if you're able to tell retailers you're going to have people come back because your store is the only place they can get their product, and you're going to continue to develop, and they'll get your attention. So when I think of that defining value, I think of benefits received over burdens endured. What do I get? What's the benefit I get? And what do I go through to get that? That's how you want to think about value. Buyers buy solutions to problems. All right, really, 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 really important slide. So again, for those of you that are on a couple weeks ago, you saw this. If you're on next week, you'll see this slide. This is why I call it my money slide. The most important slide in any presentation I do. You have to answer these four questions: who you are, what you do, how you're different, and why you're better. And the why you're better is what problem you solve for the customer and the consumer. So again, I keep coming back to that, right? It's the why. Is it you're going to bring new customers in the store? Is it you're going to bring more people to the category? Is it your product is priced higher, so they're going to make more money even if they trade off your hot sauce for Frank's hot sauce? Maybe it's profit margin. Maybe you give them more profit margin than competition. So there's a lot of different things that you can do here, but this is why I call it the money slide. All right, let's talk very briefly about this concept called economic value proposition. And for those of you that missed the first session on food marketing strategy, I'll spend a lot more time on that the next time we offer that. But there's basically three things you give people. And this is always relative to the competition. So when you get a meeting with a retailer, they're going to compare you to other brands in your category. There's really no truly new products in food. So they're going to compare you to something. So there's three things you give that retailer: less of something, the same of something, or more of something, depending on what their reference group is. And there's generally three things that they're going to give you: less money, the same money, or more money. So what I talk about all the time is you can make money, you can solve problems, you can differentiate in all these boxes. This is the only box that you never want to be in, same for same. And the reason you never want to be in this box is you're giving people the same of something and they're giving you the same money. So why would they switch? If you're not giving them any reason to switch, why would they switch? So the reason why I like specialty food is premium product for premium price, more for more. Again, think about, for those of you that ever bought Frank's hot sauce versus some hot sauce you've never heard of before. It's usually more money. Maybe it's the person's picture on there. Maybe you bought it at a farmer's market. Maybe you bought it at a specialty store. Maybe you tried it at a restaurant. Maybe restaurants are selling their hot sauce, right? So they're willing to pay more because they think they're getting more. And the good part with this is, again, retailers like this because you're bringing more revenue into their store. That's a good thing. So not that you have to exclusively be a premium product and premium price, but if you're able to be in this box, that's always a good box to start in. All right, when I think about the retail and how the retailer thinks, again, they think of these concepts called basket size, loyalty, and frequency. Basket size means that they would like to have more stuff in the shopping cart. So if you have data or you have assumptions or a logical flow that says when my product is bought, these things are in the shopping cart. So again, I'll think about marinades or hot sauces or spices or things like that. Typically, when you buy those, there's usually some protein involved, either beef or pork or chicken or turkey or fish or whatever, okay? So basket size means when your product is in the shopping cart, how much do people spend? What's the average shopping cart, the average basket size? Loyalty is really important to retailers. They want to know where you shop. So think about the stores where you have a card, that frequent shopper card, or we call it a loyalty card. They're able to track your purchases. Now, they don't know how often you go to other stores, but they do know how often you go to their store. So they'd like to have you come back to their store over and over and over again. So again, if you're able to go to a retailer and say, I'm going to give you, an exclusive for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, and your store is the only place where people can get my product, that's definitely going to drive loyalty, right? Because they can't get any other place. And then the third thing they think about is frequency. So let's say the average grocery shopper shops one time a week in a grocery store. Can you get them to come 2 times a week? Or can you get them to come to your store twice a month instead of once a month? So frequency is another term that's really important. So again, if you're going to sell to any retailer, these are the words and the language you want to use: basket size, loyalty, frequency. Or as I like to say again, acquire, retain, develop, okay? Acquisition, retention, development. Make what will sell, don't sell what you make. So find out what customers want, find out what consumers want, and give them what they want. So I know this is kind of sounds counterintuitive, but when we're talking about marketing, wants are always more important than needs. If you can sell to wants, that's the emotional part. We want to sell to the emotional part. And when we think about that, people buy 2 things, right? They buy good feelings, which is emotional, and they buy solutions to problems, which is rational. So you have a cold, you're going to go off and look for cough medicine. You're not going to go off and buy cough medicine if you don't have a cold. Or you have a headache, you're going to go buy headache remedy, right? So that's a solution to a problem. When we think about understanding the shopper, this is how we think about segmenting the shopper, okay? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. These are the things we talk about. And again, we spent a lot of time talking about this in brand. We spent a lot of time talking about this in food marketing strategy. When we think about segmentation, there's a couple different ways we can group people. One is based on how they behave. Are they a heavy user, a medium user, or a light user of our product? What are they looking for? What benefit are they looking for? Convenience, quality, freshness, or value? Can we describe them? And the descriptors are always the easiest thing to do with people, right? Maybe it's gender, age, education, location, ethnicity, race, income level, where they live, where they work, those kinds of things. So these are ways that we put people into groups. Then we figure out who we're going to go after. We call that the target market. And then once we pick the target market, we position our product. So a couple ways we can think about targeting are: how's the group unique? Again, how they look, how they think, how they act. Maybe how big the market is, how fast it's growing, who's the competition, is it profitable, does it fit with what we do? When we think of positioning, this happens in the mind of the customer. This happens between the ears. And we want to make sure we have a clear, distinct, and desirable place in the mind of the customer. So when I say Starbucks, you all have an image in your mind. It may be a different image for all the people on this call, but each of you has an image of Starbucks. When I say Dunkin' Donuts, you have an image. McDonald's coffee, McCafe coffee, you have an image. Wawa coffee, Tim Hortons coffee, Panera coffee, Saxby's coffee, whoever. Okay, clear, distinct, and desirable. So I'm a big Disney fan. Tigger's one of my favorite Disney characters. And if you think about Tigger's tagline, it's "I'm the only one." Now, you and I both know kind of looks like a tiger to me, right? It's got, orange, has stripes, but in his mind, in the mind of the customer, he's the only one. So when you think about positioning your brand, think about how can you become Tigger? How can you be the only one? The way I think about positioning is to the target market, brand X is the frame of reference, that's the point of difference. Or use Bounty paper towels as an example. To the person cleaning up the spill, Bounty is the paper towel that's most absorbent. So again, think about who you're going after. You're obviously the brand. What's the frame of reference and what's the point of difference? Okay. And you should be able to write a positioning statement for your product. And when you go to the retailer, when you go to the sales call, you can say, here's who my target market is. Here's the problem I solve for them. Here's why they are important to you. All right, these are 5 trends that I think you've been going on for a while, but I think we're here for 2021 and beyond. So I am a baby boomer. I'm one of the younger baby boomers. Nobody cares about me anymore. All these retailers, food retailers, care about millennials and Gen Z. So if you're in that group, great. If you're not in that group, tough luck. Okay, again, that doesn't mean they're going to ignore us, but they've identified millennials and Gen Z. So basically people from the age of 18 to 40 as the future of food marketing. And that's who they're going after. And that's why they're going after this called omni-channel. So again, if you think about the world we live in, yes, we still watch TV. Yes, many of us still have telephones in our house that are hardwired phones, but we don't use them. Most of us, including baby boomers and even older people older than me, get a lot of information from their phone. So that's this concept of omni-channel. We want to talk to customers wherever they're looking for information. And that's why I talked about point 3. The third screen is the first screen. So almost all of America has a cell phone and most of the people have a smartphone. And whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung or whatever, okay? A lot of people are using this to get their information. So if you have a website, make sure that your website is optimized for mobile because a lot of people look for information on their phones. Stores get smaller. So this gets back to my thing about talking about specialty food stores. Back in the 90s, stores got bigger to compete with Walmart. Now stores are getting smaller because people don't want to walk through a 100,000 square foot store to get their food. And then finally, I believe experience is still king. So think about a store that you go to, think about a restaurant you go to, think about a retailer, food retailer that you go to that gives a great experience for you. Now, again, all of us define experience differently, okay? All of us define experience differently. But I want you guys to jump on the chat and tell me what food retailer you think delivers a great experience for you, however you define experience. So just type your answer in the chat. Food retailer, great experience. Come on, you guys have to have opinions out there. Starbucks, Wegmans, great. Thank you. Stephanie, Shannon, great. 2 choices, 2 great choices. Chick-fil-A's come up in the past. People look at Chick-fil-A differently than they look at KFC, differently they look at McDonald's, differently they look at Wendy's. All those places sell chicken, but they just look at Chick-fil-A different. Certainly, Capitol Grill, great one, Stacy. Yeah, if we think of restaurants, great experience. So you know, if you're going to Capitol Grill, you're going to spend a lot of money for dinner, but you expect to have great food with a great server, maybe a great bottle of wine or beverages, and served in a nice, pleasing atmosphere. So a place like the Capitol Grill is not going to be like Outback Steakhouse. We're not going to have 100 people sitting on top of one another, even without social distancing. Great. All right, in the first session, food marketing strategy, I spent a lot of time talking about this. I just wanted to kind of come back and talk about, when I think about food marketing planning, these are the things I think about. Leadership, know what business you're in, know your customer, know your external environment, know your internal environment. Do the unexpected, focus, 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 concentrate your resources, be mobile, advanced, and secure. So if you missed that first session on food marketing strategy, we are going to offer it again, okay? Natalie, great one. I am not familiar with that. Where is that? Where are you located, Natalie? Is that in the city here in Philly, or where are you located? Abington. Okay, great. I'm not familiar with them, but here's a great example of people that are in Ambler may go to the store because it's not a chain, and because it may be privately owned, and because probably the person who owns the store is making the coffee. So that's a great example of somebody who might support a small local business. Great, great, great. Thank you. Great quote from Sam Walton. Customer is not your customer until he or she is a repeat customer. So you can get people in your store once, you can get people to try your product once, but you got to get them to come back again and again and again. That's the key. So these are 4 things that consumers want. Is this for me? What am I buying? Does it save me time? Is it a great experience, right? Relevancy, clarity, simplicity, enjoyable experience. And again, if you do all these things, you deliver value. What do I get? What do I have to go through to get it? I like to think there's 4 key consumer drivers in food. Now there's more, but these are the 4 that I think are really important. Saves me time, saves me money, entertains me, is good for me. Okay, saves me time, saves me money. Maybe because of COVID now, safety is important on here. That could be a key consumer driver. So when we think about this, identify the key change areas, characterize the change or trend, figure out the so what, and develop a marketing response for each piece. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So really, really important. The reason why you want to have objectives, and we call them SMART objectives, and the reason why you want to have a plan and a roadmap is you want to be able to go back and say, this is what I think I'm going to do in the amount of time I have to do it, and this is the result I expect to get. And at the end of the week, the end of the month, the end of the quarter, the end of the year, whatever it is, you go back and say, okay, I said I was going to get into 10 chains. Did I get into 10 chains? I said I was going to increase sales 15%. Did I increase sales 15%? All right, let's talk about managing the presentation. And this is actually from my friends at Johnson & Johnson. This is how a couple of the guys at Johnson & Johnson thinking about making a call. So many people think this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit in a boardroom. We're going to present to a whole bunch of people. We're going to do a great job. They're going to clap. It usually doesn't happen that way. This is usually, if you get a meeting with a retailer, this is usually what their office looks like. Sometimes they have 2 computer screens going. They have a bunch of papers all over the place. They got some crap on the wall over here. Of course, they have the obligatory pictures of their kids, their family, their wife, whatever, but they got stacks of stuff all over the place. So again, and typically you're going to sit over here and you're going to have a conversation across the desk. So think about that. Now, one of the things I tell people all the time, the first time you meet somebody, you want to try to pay attention to all this stuff over here, because that's how you're going to build a relationship with people. That's how you're going to build rapport. So maybe figure out what this picture is over here. That might be important to people. Obviously, if they have family, maybe they have a picture of when they went to college. Maybe it's a favorite football team, whatever. This is kind of like the opportunity for the small talk here. But this is a typical buyer's desk. They have crap all over the place. This is Walmart. I made 1 million trips down to Walmart. So this room is as small as it looks. And the reason why they do that is they want to kind of get you in and out. The chairs are really uncomfortable. They're hard on your butts. They're there for a reason, right? They want to get in. So these are the buyers, right? This is the Walmart guy here. Here's Walmart thing. And then these 3 people are trying to sell him. So Walmart, one of the biggest retailers in the world, Small rooms, quick meetings. All right. The other thing I think was really important here is you want to have a conversation. So one of the things I hate about the webinars is I'm not able to have a conversation with you guys other than jumping on the chat and the Q&A, which is fine. We'll do that. But I really like having a conversation. So if you're able to come on to the office hours tomorrow night, we can have a more substantive conversation. And when you make a sales call, this is where you want to be. You want to engage the person. You want to ask questions. You want to listen. So yes, you need to have a presentation, but you want to have more of a conversation. Really important. Typically, you might get an hour meeting, but again, I would tell you for the first time meetings, they're probably going to give you 15 minutes to a half an hour. Usually it's in the office. Usually there's a structured agenda. So you'll see, I'll tell you, typically how you want to do this. If you have product in there already, how you doing? That's called the scorecard. What are the priorities? Maybe you're trying to sell new items in, and what are the things you have to, the administrative stuff you have to talk about, okay? So if you're trying to sell a new item, you want to set the table. You want to frame the opportunity. I talked about having consumer insights and brands and trends. You want to introduce the product. You want to have some passion. What's the benefits? Why are consumers going to like this? What's the reason to believe? So the reason to believe might be your launch plan, might be your sampling plan, might be your advertising plan, your social media plan, okay? And then how are you going to activate with that specific customer? Product, price, promotion, distribution, and obviously we want to try to close the sale. So keys to success: customize your presentation, keep slides to a minimum. Again, the first time you meet with the buyer, you're not going to really understand their hot buttons, but you're probably going to have like an email exchange back and forth. Maybe you'll be able to get them on the phone a couple times for some phone calls. Take really good notes. Think about what you think the hot buttons are going to be for that buyer, and prepare, prepare, prepare. Okay, a big part of selling is what we call storytelling. And again, I don't know how old you guys are. I'm sure some of you guys are parents. Maybe your parents have young kids. Think about telling a story to a young kid. Think about reading a book to a young kid, okay? That's how you want to think about a sales presentation. You're telling a story, okay? You're telling a story. So a lot of times we want to lead with the answer. We definitely want to have a page that's a summary and recommendations page. So make sure you know what your ask is. What do you want them to do? That's the call to action, okay? And then you want to relate the call to action to the category plan, right? Don't show them you did a lot of hard work. Show them you have data and that you're turning insights into action. So if you have the opportunity to bring a lot of detail, don't put that in the presentation, put that in the appendix. And if you get asked questions, you can show how smart you are by going to the appendix. And again, make sure you're using the language that makes the most impact on your audience. So think about the weather. Doesn't matter where you're from, okay? Before we get the local forecast of whether it's going to rain, we have to see all this stuff. Or if you ever watch the Weather Channel, right? I log on when I'm on the Weather Channel on TV. I wait till the 8s because it's local on the 8s. I log on at 8 after, 18 after, whatever. I don't care about this unless I'm traveling somewhere. I want to know what's happening here, right? We give you all this information. And just when you're ready to flip the channel, they give you the forecast, right? Is it going to rain today? What's the 7-day forecast? I'm going down the beach for the weekend, as an example. So here's an example of people that bring data to a meeting. Now, I know you can't read this. I can't read this. I have no idea. If somebody showed me this chart, I see some pretty pictures here with colors. I'm assuming I have to look at these colors, but I don't know what I'm supposed to look at. So in this case, and this happened to be for Purina cat chow, this was the number that they wanted somebody to look at. But think about giving this page to somebody you never want to show something like this. Okay. All right. So there's some do's and don'ts here. And again, I think you can, you can go back. I think this is really important to talk about. So questions to ask before you start your presentation. What are you trying to accomplish? How do you define success? Who is this for? How much time do you have? And again, remember, plan on having less time than they give you. Plan on having less time than they give you. Are you going to bring somebody with you? So typically the first time you go in, it's you. Maybe you have somebody working for you, but figure out who's going to do what. And again, figure out the key metrics, the measurements, and language. So pricing is always important. Margins are always important. Turnover is important. Basket size is important. Frequency is important. All those things are important. And again, create an outline of what you want to say and how you want to say it. Okay. Let me do a time check here. All right, great. We have about a half an hour. All right, so this actually comes from, for those of you that are Gallo wine fans, this actually comes from my friends at Gallo. So this is how Gallo teaches their salespeople to sell, okay? So the way they define selling is convincing someone to accept your point of view, or convincing someone to accept your proposal, or convincing someone to do something that you want them to do. Obviously, you're there trying to sell them your product, okay, and your point of view. So that's how they define selling. They think of selling as 4 parts. So again, we actually have a sales class at St. Joe's. I spend the whole semester talking about what I'm going to talk to you about in about 10 minutes. The first thing is the approach. So obviously you have to get a meeting with the buyer. And when you get the meeting, you have to capture their attention quickly and undivided. So that's why I mentioned back on Ron Tanner's presentation, talking about going to a trade show. A lot of times buyers and retailers and merchandising managers go to trade shows to see new ideas and new business and new things. So you might have a great conversation with the CEO of a company on this floor, and they're going to set up a meeting with one of their people. When you get the meeting, how do you approach them? The body is where you talk about the product, the service, the idea, and how it will benefit the retailer. The proof is data, if you have data, right? How do you get their confidence to create positive images? And then the close is how do you get them to take action now? So let's talk about each of these. So when we talk about the approach, it's you want to get my attention, you want to get me to listen. So it could be breaking the ice, could be an attention getter. And again, we're going to be doing this live now rather than being on Zoom, but think about that. All you're seeing right now is my neck, my head and my neck. But when you're presenting live to a buyer, they see your whole body. You're in the room with her. You're in the store with her. You're in a meeting room with them. Okay, so think about how you're going to do that. The body of the sales presentation is the what and why. That's the sales story. Think about your retailer's concerns. Think about consultative selling. Tailor your presentation to each individual retailer. So I'll tell you, for those of you in Philadelphia, Acme thinks different than Giant. Giant thinks different than ShopRite. ShopRite thinks different than Wegmans. Wegmans thinks different than Whole Foods. I just mentioned 5 grocery store chains in Philadelphia: Acme, Giant, ShopRite, Wegmans, Whole Foods. So you can have, maybe 75% of the presentation is the same, but you're going to tell Acme different things than you're going to tell Wegmans. You're going to show Wegmans different things than you're going to show Whole Foods, depending on who you go to. Okay. And please ask questions. This is where you want to have a dialogue. You want to have a conversation. Okay. So the features, a lot of people think about when you buy a car, totally outside of food. The car salesman typically sells you features, but you don't buy features, you buy benefits, right? So think about benefits, not features. All right. So if you think of the features of wine, for Gallo, maybe it's consistent product. They have great pricing, crisp and dry taste. They have point of sale marketing materials. They have great ad support, and they have new labels, and they're able to rebrand. But how do these things benefit the retailer? How do they help the retailer? And if you think of what's in it for me, that's really the most important thing to think about. What's in it for the retailer? Because benefits create repeat business, and benefits create satisfied customers. And obviously sales and profits, and you get the retailer's attention. So if you think of a bridge, okay, and this is kind of like, again, the Gallo thing, the so what? The bridge gets you from features to benefits. That's the so what. What this means to you, what this means for you. This will help you. This will give you. This will affect you. So think about what features you have and then use one of these, okay? Our product is gluten-free, which means to you, whatever the benefit is. Our product is the hottest hot sauce out there, which means to you, whatever the benefit is. This will affect you, this will give you, this will bring new people into the store. So remember, people buy benefits, not features. Again, some examples. Last year, our brand was the fastest growing hot sauce in America. Our new brand will have established customers and continue to bring in new customers. New customers equals more profit. More profit equals happy retailers. Pretty simple. Here's some examples of proof. So maybe you have data, you have sales data. Most of you should be able to get testimonials and photos. I'm assuming if you have a business already, you have a Facebook page, you have an Instagram page, right? You have Google things. Maybe you're on Pinterest, maybe you're on Yelp or whatever. Google reviews. Use those to your advantage. Okay, if you're able to get people to actually give you written testimonials, use them. So then we talk about closing. So you've gotten a meeting, you've presented your wares, now you have to ask for the sale. So these are some things we talk about where buyers actually give you a signal that they're ready to buy. One is they basically say they're ready to buy. If you see them nodding throughout the presentation, that's a good thing. If they ask questions during the presentation, that's a great thing. Okay, if they show excitement and receptivity, that's a great thing. If they're asking you specific questions, that's a great thing. Now, if they're negative, that's a good thing too, because at least you're engaging with them. You're finding out what their objections are. So a big part to selling is handling and overcoming objections. So you want to know what the problems are, right? And you want to keep thinking about that. So there's basically 6 different ways you can close. I'll go through each of these in detail. One is a choice close, physical action, assumptive, review benefits, direct, and yes chain. So the choice close is basically you say, would you like option A or option B? Physical action close is you literally hand the person the tablet or hand the person the purchase order and say, would you like to buy? Okay. Assumptive close is a pretty strong close. Review benefits. This is a really good one here, right? You're going back and talking about all the things and all the benefits you have to the retailer. Okay. Direct close, you're basically asking them to buy the product, and yes chain is you get them to say yes to a lot of different questions and then ultimately ask them that. So again, generally, you're probably not going to do yes chain. You may be direct close, right? But think about how these things work for you as you go through practicing your sales techniques. So why do we fear closing a sale? A lot of people hate sales. I love sales. And remember what I said, I've made a lot of mistakes. Selling is about making mistakes, but learning from your mistakes. So that's probably why a lot of people don't like sales. But these are the buyer signals, right? These are the buyer signals. Now, when you get the sale, stop talking. If this is 5 minutes into the sales presentation, they're really like your product, ask them for the order, confirm the order, and get out of their office. I can't tell you how many times I had buyers commit in the first 10 or 15 minutes. Even if it was an hour meeting, I shook their hand, I got up, I walked out, I got the sale. Okay. You don't want to talk yourself out of a sale. All right. Any questions on that? Let me stop there for a second. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. We got about 20 minutes here. So this is how I think about preparing for a buyer call. This is my stuff now, okay? When you think about buyer-seller negotiations, again, retailers have to have price. Like, what are you going to charge me? What should we charge the retailer? Are you going to give me promotional pricing? We have a whole session, Mark and I do a whole session on consumer and trade promotion. What kind of advertising you're going to do? Are you going to do coupons? You're going to do sampling? You're going to reduce the price of the product? Are you going to come to our trade shows? You're going to support our golf outing? You're going to give us money to put the product on the shelf? How are you going to get the product to the store? So all these things you need to think about before you go in, because this is part of the buyer-seller negotiation. Remember my money slide. If you can help the retailer solve the problem of the shopper customer, that's a win-win. So that's what you want to think about. All right. So for those of you that see me present before, you know I hate textbook presentations. This is a textbook slide here. I had to put this in because it's pretty straightforward. But this is basically selling 101, the sales thing. So the first thing you have to do is prospecting. You have to go off and figure out who you can sell your product to. Okay. Then once you prospect, you have to qualify that prospect. Who do you have the best chance of selling to? Who's giving you a meeting? Who might give you the most amount of money? Who's going to be the most loyal? Whatever it is. You have your pre-approach and planning. And this is where you develop the presentation. Okay. Then you have the approach, you present, you close. If they don't give you the order, you keep going back and figure out what their objections are, answer the questions, try to close again, and ultimately, hopefully you get the sale. And then you follow up. So when you shake hands and leave that office, your job is not over, it's just beginning. You have to follow up and say, okay, Susan, here's what we agreed to. You're going to buy these products at this price. We're going to deliver on this day. It's going to go in this aisle in the store, and here's how we're going to support it. And this might be like a very quick process, or this might be a couple of month process to get your product on the shelf, but really, really important. And there's definitely a sequential action here for sure. So when we think of features, advantages, benefits, this is kind of similar to the Gallo piece. Okay. Feature, advantage, benefit, or feature, proof, benefit for Gallo. So again, maybe size, color, price, shape. The advantage, fastest selling, more information. How's it going to help the consumer? How's it going to help the buyer? People are interested in what the product does for them. It can be practical, think rational, or psychological, think emotional. And again, think needs and wants. Benefits should be specific statements. Specific statements. So 0 to 60 for a car in 3 seconds is the feature, but the benefit is I can get on the expressway quick. I can pass cars quick. I can get on an on-ramp quick, as an example. Okay, so again, when we think about this, talk about your product, present your marketing plan, explain your business case. Here's an example of pancake mix. Okay, here's the features: farmhouse recipe, fortified. All you need to do is add water, stir, and cook. Advantages: great taste, fluffy and light, highly nutritious, quick and easy to prepare. Benefits: expands breakfast menu, expands breakfast business, minimal kitchen labor. So this would be an example of food service, right? Minimal kitchen time and labor. So here's some more marketing plan stuff. How we're going to deliver the product. What's the advantage of just delivering weekly instead of monthly? Well, you don't have to store large quantities. You can keep your inventory space low. You can have turnover, increase your inventory turnover. Because we're local, we can fill orders quick and prevent out of stocks is the benefit. And again, business is case. Okay, so we talked about proof. I'm going to skip through this. Okay, we're selling a candy bar. The king size is the feature. Will bring you more sales and profits, which is the benefit. Because it's the fastest growing segment, that's the advantage, and more economical size feature. So feature, advantage, benefit. So this is a great acronym I talk about all the time. SELL. Show the feature, explain the advantage, lead into the benefit, and then let the customer talk or listen. So show, explain, lead, listen. Show, explain, lead, listen. This is the most important part, is the listening part. You want to get the person talking as quickly as you can and as often as you can. Really important. And again, you may get some bad vibes, or you may get some negative stuff, but that's great. That's great. That's a learning experience for you. Here's some sample questions. How does that sound to you to get them talking? Is that important to your customer? That's great, isn't it? Susan, I noticed you were smiling. What'd you think about that product? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What kind of customers might buy this product? Where do you think this might fit in the store? And again, remember, you can go and say, I walked up the candy aisle and I saw this, but I really think this might fit with the greeting cards. And here's why I think it might fit with the greeting cards, as an example. So again, once we get back to whatever normal is going to be, think about how close you want to get to somebody. So again, normally the first time you meet the buyer, you're going to be across the desk. This here is a sign that these people have a relationship and that he has allowed this person to get close to him. But generally, the first couple of meetings are going to be here, or if you're talking to somebody in their store, it's probably going to be in one of the aisles in the store standing up. So think about that, right? Think about how we do that. Understand body language, understand nonverbal messages. Again, it's really difficult for me because I'm the talking head here, which I hate being a talking head. And even when we are in the office hours, at least I can see you and hear you rather than just communicating with you electronically. But look for nonverbal messages. If you're able to bring somebody to the sales call with you, have them look for things and take notes. Is she writing something down when I talk about this, and go back and note that on the slide, or maybe go back and do that, okay? So generally, again, if people are leaning forward, that's responsive. Open body, open arms, open hands, responsive. Eager, ready to agree, right? These are all things that are responsive. Reflective, okay? Maybe it's head tilted. Maybe they're evaluating. Maybe their legs are crossed. Maybe they put their hands behind the head. Maybe they're not paying attention. If they're a fugitive, that's not a good thing. And obviously hands on the hips, probably not good. Leaning forward, finger pointing, whatever. So we want to be careful with that, right? So some barriers to communication. Well, maybe your idea and their idea is totally different. Maybe you didn't do a good enough job of explaining the need for the product. You don't want to be a rude and obnoxious salesperson. That's not a good thing. Okay, remember, consultative selling is really important. If you bring a lot of information, sometimes that just turns people off. So you have to have information, but you don't want to have too much information. And again, what you say and how you say it is really, really important. Your body language is really important. So you want to adapt to the buyer style. It's going to be very difficult the first time you meet somebody to figure them out, but you should get practice at trying to assess people. Okay. So I will tell you, one of the benefits you all have now is, you might want to call this stalking, but go on and try to find out as much information as you can about a buyer here. Okay. So if we look at this, I actually went in and put one of my former buyers at Giant. And this tells you all about who she is and what she does. Okay. And her name is Sheila Kostiuk. I haven't seen her for a long time, but I'm not connected with her on LinkedIn, but I am connected with 3 people that she either worked for or worked for her. So obviously the first time you meet with somebody, you're not going to have this level, but you can go into LinkedIn and just do a search on LinkedIn and find out maybe where they went to school. Maybe this is important. Or maybe she happened to work in Washington. She's from Giant. So before she went to Giant supermarkets in Harrisburg, she worked at Giant supermarkets in Virginia. So here's an example. Again, you can do this on your own. Go find out some information on your buyer. Find out what's important to the retailer. Again, who's their target market? How's your product positioned? Is it incremental sales? Is it exclusive? Do you have data? Will it increase basket size, store count, attract new customers, especially millennials and Gen Z? So if you have a product that appeals to people under 40, retailers should listen to you. And then finally, does it drive category sales? How are we going to price the product? How are we going to promote the product? How does this compare to the competition? Now, maybe the first time you go in, you're not going to understand what the competition's charging, but you can certainly go to the retailer and figure out what they're charging on the shelf. You can go to the retailer and figure out how often they promote. You can go to the retailer and figure out how deep they promote. So if your competition sells products at $2.99 every day and they advertise it for buy one, get one free, they're basically selling, two jars for $3, or they're giving them a 50% discount. So you want to understand that. Okay. And again, if you have an idea of where they are, you want to think about where you are. Are you giving them more profit? Are you giving them more profit margin? Are you giving them higher penny profit? Are you giving them more profit dollars? Because if you're giving them a higher price and better margin, that means that they don't need to grow the category. So if they sell one less jar of Skippy peanut butter and one more jar of Susan's peanut butter, they're making more money. even though it's 1-for-1. Okay. On the flip side, if it's lower price and lower margin, that means the category has to show growth. So that's typically why when I think about this, I think about going in with a higher price product and higher margin product. Again, we have a whole session on consumer trade promotion. How are you going to promote? What kind of point of sale? What kind of advertising? All these kinds of things. How are you going to get the product to the store? Are you going to pay to put the product on the shelf? So if you're not familiar with this concept called slotting allowance, some retailers charge you to put your product on the shelf. So they're going to say to you, okay, Sue, I'll take your product, but I need $10 per store per item, or $100 per store, or $1,000 for all the chains, or whatever it is. This is all negotiable. How do you get it to the store? How do you get it to the shelf? Where does it go in the store? Again, these are all things that the retailer wants to know about. You're asking them to take your product in. You should tell them what you're going to sell, what their cost is, what their markup is, what they can expect from a turnover standpoint, where it should go in the store, how often you're going to promote, so on and so forth. Plan the call. So this is back on my work, plan your work your plan. What do you want to get out of the call? Is it just an introductory meeting? Is it really to identify what the problems are and you're going to come back? Is it to sell your products, or once you have the products in, is to do a promotional plan? What do you want to get out of the call? Do your homework. Again, website, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those places. Do your homework part 2. Check out their store as a consumer. Grab a shopping cart and walk the store. Is there a gap in the market? Is there a market in the gap? Shop their store online too. See what their online platform is. Figure out potential areas where your product might fit. Maybe it's permanent space, maybe it's incremental displays. Figure out complementary items where you might be able to cross merchandise, and take pictures and use them in the presentation. Show them you were in their store and show them, hey, I think my product fits great here. I took a picture. Here's where I think it'll go. Then check out the stores from their view. Talk to department managers, grocery manager, store manager, whoever. Tell them who you are. Tell them you have a meeting at corporate. Find out what problems they have. And then when you go to corporate, say, hey, I went to these 5 stores. I talked to the store manager, and they think this product will work because of X. Or they're not happy with brand Y, and I think I can fill that void. Okay. Part 4, secondary research. You can do internet research on the store, competition, category, products. You can do primary research. You can conduct research yourself. Watch people shop. Figure out how you segment people. Figure out who the important people are. Figure out what you want them to do. Okay. Develop the presentation. So I always like to say less is more. If you think of my money slide, you want to spend 10% of the presentation on who you are. You want to spend 10% of the presentation on what you do. You want to spend 20% on how you're different, but you want to spend 60% on what problem you solve for them. So again, think features, advantages, benefits. Spend the most amount of time on benefits. All right, now this is actually 15 years old. I want to go through this pretty quick. We only have a couple minutes, but here's how I sold when I was a Tasty Cake. Here's the company overview. Here's who we are. Here's where we are. Here's our competition. Here's our competitive advantage. We can sell fresh or frozen. We have flexible distribution. We can respond quickly. We have great technology. And at the time, we had extended shelf life. We had a transformation plan. Nobody cared about that, but our corporation did. We identified the trends that were happening at the time. So remember, this was 15 years ago. Portion control was really hot. We actually identified some of the competition. We showed our products and how they related to the competition. Okay, wellness was really hot back then, so we showed a wellness platform, but we also had indulgent. We had seasonal. We had breakfast items. We had snack cake items. We had snack bar items. We showed where it would go in the store. Great distribution. Here's a leave behind. Yeah, Ron Tanner talked about a one-page leave behind. So this was kind of like, this is a new product we were launching, which was sugar-free products. There's how it looks. Here's how we're going to support it, so on and so forth. So I am going to cut to the chase here because we are running out of time, but I did want to talk a little bit about what's coming up, okay? Ooh, sorry about that. So Divya, did you put the link in the Q&A, I mean in the chat for the survey yet?
Yep, I put it right now.
All right, great. And you can bring us home. So again, I thank you all for coming on. We do have open office hours tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8:30. Divya's put the link in there, I believe, already earlier, but there's a link for those of you that registered. You need to register again for the office hours tomorrow night. And again, if you have a product or service or an idea or whatever, I'm happy to spend a lot of time with you tomorrow night. I will be on from 6:30 to 8:30 tomorrow night. I'm here to help. So I'll turn it back to Divya to close this out here. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much, George. Please fill in the survey that I've put in the chat. It is required by our funders, the Small Business Administration, so that we can continue to provide no-cost webinars for you all. I have also put a link to a resource page, so you can go there and check our upcoming webinars and register for the same. Thank you so much for joining. We hope this was very helpful for you all, and thank you so much, George.
My pleasure. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye-bye.